And now it is with immense pleasure that I congratulate everyone who loves Arsenal on back-to-back Premier League titles as soon as they vacate Manchester City's titles in about 25-year time. This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name's Elliot Smith, the Black Man's Twitter Yankee Gunner. It's weird. We didn't do the open-top bus parade. We didn't do the huge celebration. And you just wonder, will they reschedule those when Manchester City's titles are vacated? I don't know. I suspect not, which means that all we will have is the knowledge that we were denied that joy. But we were given a hell of a lot of joy this season. And I do think that we are in that period right after the season where you can choose how you want to reflect on it. For us here at the ArsenalVision Podcast, we're going to do a lot of that. We're going to do a lot of season summary stuff. We're going to do a lot of looking ahead to what we need to do next season to take the next step forward, assuming Manchester City haven't been folded out of existence, which would, be fine. But, steps need to be taken. So we'll talk about that. There's going to be an awful lot, I'll just say it, of transfer content on the Patreon. Clive is going to literally have smoke coming off him from the scouting videos we're going to do. And I really do think if you've never seen those scouting videos, that's one to check out because it's not YouTube comps. It is a lot of the footage you can't get anywhere else. And I think if you look back on our scouting videos, it was a way to get a sense of a player that cut through some of the hype that goes around transfer season. So we'll be doing that. We'll redo some of our director of football pods that were super fun in light of what's happened since that time to see if we're still sort of in the same place there together. So a lot of fun stuff to do. Today, we'll do a bit of the weekend that was stuff. I think it'd be silly having all of us been together not to do a little bit of weekend review. So we'll do a little weekend that was. We will talk about the game a bit, even though I think it's a weird game and in some ways not a game that needs a lot of analysis. We will certainly talk about how we feel about the season, not a full season review, but just an overall feeling and maybe a little bit on how we're being analyzed and discussed versus how we're actually feeling, and maybe a bit on why Rodri should be fired out of a cannon into the sun. So there's a lot to do today. Paul, given the flying back situation, not able to join us today. He was over there with us this weekend and was actually a star of the live show, let's be honest. More on that in a moment. But here with me now is Clive. You can find him on Twitter at ClivePFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
And Tim, you can find him on Twitter at Stillman Dinner. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
Yeah. Pretty soon I'm just going to drop that whole thing from the intro along with the post-match podcast thing that I keep saying. But whatever. It is what it is. It's podcast heritage. So let's not navel gaze too much. I know that that's not the most fun for people, but I do think that there's something to be said for reliving a special weekend. We are not just people who talk about Arsenal together, but and I get the sense so much when I'm over there and see everyone. We are people who all love and care about each other as people. So, I want to hear about the people I care about and their weekend. So, Tim, I'll just start with you, and we'll do it quickly. We'll spend 4 or 5 minutes on this and then move on. But, we had a group dinner on Friday to celebrate. We had the event at Ali Pali on Saturday. And then we had the game and some drinks together on Sunday. And it was the perfect way to send off the season, minus the absolute cherry on the icing on the cake. So what are your thoughts on the weekend as a whole?
Yeah, I think the live event has become like my favorite thing of the year. And I'm really glad it's a regular kind of annual thing. I'd really do them every week. And I think obviously it's very different when you're a panelist and not a presenter. And like you've got to kind of hang the show together and, actually come up with stuff. But kind of I always reflect just before we go on stage. It's just like, I mean, personally, not a hint of nerves whatsoever. Not a hint, like not even slight.
Paul felt the same way. Yeah. Paul was a wreck. I'm kidding.
Like not a hint. And I was kind of reflecting on why that is, and it's just because it just feels so easy and comfortable. And I always tell people, like for me, it's exactly as easy as it looks. Just talking about football with your friends, that's we all do that, right? And it's not difficult really. Like I said, presenting difficult, but difficult is maybe overstating it, but more difficult. And yeah, I absolutely love those live events. They're such a buzz for me. And then the game itself was, I mean, I drink on the kind of on the Blackstock Road, so more on the Highbury side, and I've never seen it like that before.
Yeah.
We went for lunch, and when we came out, it was just it look. I hadn't seen the area look like that since the last game at Highbury, where people were literally just spilled into the streets. And I think on reflection, the police might have just closed some more of the roads because there really were just people like standing in the middle of a very busy road, cradling their drinks. And we walked past the Gunners pub and the roof was literally on fire. Someone lit a flare through it in the Gunners garden, I believe. So everyone was kind of spilled outside. And I got some very good friends who live very, very close to the stadium. We ended up going for a drink in their garden because you couldn't get in anywhere. Not only could you not get in anywhere, you couldn't even get on the pavement anywhere. So before the game, just that. And I don't think most of us really thought it was going to happen. So it did feel like a celebration, and I won't say defiance. I think it was a bit more joyful than that. Just people determined to enjoy the day, whatever happened. And yeah, it was joyful. And like I said, I've not seen N5 look like that since the day we left Highbury. That's how monumental it looked and felt.
Yeah, obviously I've been there a fraction of the times either of you two have, but never seen it like that. And we were on the other side, obviously on the Hornsby Road side, and like it was just people everywhere as far as the eye could see, packed together. They obviously didn't all have a ticket, but now I understand how that meme about everybody says I was there at Anfield in '89 came about, because, there would have been a lot of people if the thing had happened who would have said I was there in 2024, and they wouldn't have been lying. They were there, maybe if not in the ground. And I think the problem with the live event for me is it was so beautiful and it was so lovely and I met so many great people and it was so upbeat and it was such a perfect precursor to Sunday. And then Sunday was so beautiful. It was like the most glorious day in London you could ask for, that it was like, well, this is just too perfect not to happen. It's going to happen because it would be weird if it didn't now. So I went from being like, look, it's not going to happen. I know it's not going to happen and I'm determined to enjoy the day, to it's absolutely destined to happen because everything feels too perfect and I will be crushed if it doesn't. And lo and behold, I was crushed in a way I didn't expect to be. But as far as the weekend goes, I mean, it was just, look, if I could eat less Italian food than I did on the Friday, I would do that differently, because I sat on the bed just taking very shallow breaths, trying to find room for air in my body. But aside from that, it was, yeah, it was beautiful. And Clive, we didn't get the perfect happy ending, but I think if you really ask yourself what Arsenal is about for you, I'm sure there are casual supporters, right, who it's just about the football and the winning, and if it doesn't happen, then there's not much else to it. But I do think that this was a weekend that really underscored for me what Arsenal is about, because I felt so much emotion over this weekend that had nothing to do with the football component of it. And so while I was heartbroken that it didn't happen, it made me realize that in a very weird way, as a man, of my age, obviously in my mid 30s, for this club and this community and so many people who love Arsenal and mean this much to me, it has transformed my life. It is now a thing that transcends what happens on the pitch. And look, I love my friends in Minnesota. This is not a knock on them, but I feel like the people I go see in London are people that I've known my whole life. They could be family in a way that nobody else feels to me. The Arsenal has become a family. And it's just really special. So a heartbreaking weekend in some ways, but also a really uplifting one in terms of seeing how special our club is. I think that stood out on Sunday as well.
Yep, it did. I didn't find the weekend heartbreaking at all, actually. I'm not sure why it would be heartbreaking if we didn't didn't suspect to win. I found it incredibly uplifting, the whole thing, and I refuse to be sad. I refuse to let external people and external clubs that do what they do take away the enjoyment that we all have about something that we all love, right? So, and the live event is a reminder to me that the people that listen to us, they really listen and they really care. And you get to meet them, and they travel long distances to meet us on occasions. I met somebody from Singapore. I mean, crikey, come over for the weekend to come to our event. I mean, that sort of level of
Philippines
commitment.
as well.
Yeah, that sort of level of commitment
came with a flag too.
Yeah, so, and that level of commitment was well, it just reminds you, doesn't it? That we're not just an N5 club, right? We're a global club, and so yeah, to meet those people, so many of them, I wish I could remember them all, and have the conversations that were had. It's been a weekend of conversations for me. And the more times you converse with people, the more things you learn about yourself and about how people perceive the club and perceive you and perceive us as a group. And you develop that way, the more people you meet. And so from a personal development point of view, it's a hugely important weekend. From an Arsenal weekend point of view, as Tim said, it's the best weekend of the year. And it's a weekend where I almost jump out of my normal body and go into something else. And it's quite a challenge being I like to think, a quieter, humble person when people pull you out of your normalcy and into somewhere else. And I think it's a wonderful experience, and I couldn't do it every week because I'd be exhausted.
Yeah.
And I'd have alcohol issues as well. But apart from that, it would be you couldn't beat it. It's like I said it before. I think it's like Disneyland for Arsenal people. It really is a wonderful time. One little thing missing, but hey, I don't think any of us think that's not too far away. And
no, as soon as the lawyers sort it. As soon as the lawyers sort it, Clive. No, look, the reason it was heartbreaking for me is, and I think this is true for me in a lot of ways, like I am someone who really cares about how the people I care about feel, and I tend to internalize that a lot. I get that from my mom. I'm extremely neurotic, in case you can't tell. And so seeing my friends crying, seeing Kai Havertz crying, seeing Odegaard and Saka realizing how heartbroken they were, I think built in me a sorrow that I didn't expect to have. And I think it was a little bit of everybody wanting it for each other. You know what I mean? Not just for themselves, but for each other. And I will say this, look, of course you're an Arsenal podcast, so you're going to say Manchester City's not a real club and they're not real fans. It's not that. I mean, you can say that if you want, but it's more this. I don't think there was a bigger celebration or a bigger atmosphere anywhere in football yesterday or Sunday than at the Emirates Stadium and outside the Emirates Stadium. And nothing made me more proud of Arsenal than the atmosphere at full time of a game that had just seen us fall short of the title. That was an atmosphere that would have been a legendary one at a title-winning stadium. And the Mikel Arteta chant, how that went up, the singing of the angel, how that went up when the title was gone. That was a reflection of how people feel. And it's funny, right? Because you can write narratives and you can go on Twitter and you can go on social media or streams or whatever and like say whatever you want about where this club is or we shouldn't settle or anything you want. But that was organic. That was, the 60,000 plus people singing their hearts out after the title was already gone. That is a referendum. You know what I mean? That is a true referendum. That's not agenda. That's not saying something for an effect. That's not going on social media for clout. That is a unified group of people. And I'll tell you this much. Walking down to the pub after the game, there was no aggro. There was no fighting. There was no yelling. And, you could potentially see at certain clubs or in certain ways, if the title had just slipped through our fingers, maybe fans would be at each other's throat. It was as loving and supportive as it could be. So I think organically speaking, and without wanting to try to speak for an entire fan base, Tim, it certainly felt to me like the mood at our club could not have been higher. And I would dare say the mood at our club might have actually been more unified and connected than at the one in Manchester, and now obviously that will eventually have to come to fruition, I believe, but I wouldn't trade it.
No, indeed. And I think it kind of started maybe even a few minutes before the final whistle when we all very literally knew the score. Which not everyone always did by the sounds of it during the game. But we all...
just real quick, we were sat over the Everton fans, so we were always quite aware of the score. And I do have to say, and I know they were singing "We Nearly Won the League," and they gave out in a very big way. And it's funny, it was very, very similar to how they gave out on the final day 2 seasons ago when we needed Norwich to do something to Spurs and they were celebrating every Spurs goal. And in this case, I got to say, I understand the point of being an away supporter is to take the piss out of whatever home ground you're at. But the idea of Everton sort of celebrating City, doing it instead of us, looking at their ownership situation and that club and their history and how things are being perverted in the Premier League right now, sort of surprised me that they were so invested in City doing it, not us. But maybe that's just the away supporter culture. I don't know.
It probably was a bit of that, but also, I think, Clive, you made this point very well on another podcast, Second Captains, last week, about how City being successful is convenient for everyone because you don't have to reflect very much on yourself when they do it, and also nobody dislikes Manchester City. Like there isn't like a rivalry there. I remember seeing like the tweets about Tottenham fans singing like, "Are you watching Arsenal?" Like, fair enough. I mean, you're cheering for your own team to lose. So, yes, I am watching. I'm not very envious, but fair enough. Tottenham and Arsenal are rivals. But when I saw this tweet about the Man City fans joining in, and it was like, no one invited you to the party, guys. That's like, the meme of the guy in the corner at the party.
Bro, yeah. Or the one, there's one with Drake. It's like, bro thinks he's on the team.
Yeah. It's like, no, that's like, no. And that's one of the things we're up against as well, competition wise, because nobody really, like, there's not a lot of needle in a lot of City games because a lot of people don't dislike them. Whereas I get why people have a pop at Arsenal, just like they used to have a pop at Liverpool when they were losing out to Man City. It's convenient for everyone. So, there is that to it. But I think really for us, we knew what was happening and we all knew what was going to happen. I think pretty much everyone probably shared my sense that if it was going to happen, it had to happen on Tuesday at Spurs. Like, I don't think anyone really thought that West Ham are gonna like, we're gonna pull anything out the bag. And I mean, I haven't watched highlights or anything like that, but I don't have any reason to take any issue with West Ham. It sounds to me like they competed in the game, they scored a goal, they had some VAR stuff, blah blah blah. Like, I've got no fingers to point at West Ham here in particular. Maybe Aston Villa and Unai Emery nearly tanking his team's season trying to beat us at the Emirates, and fair enough, he did it, but they won one game after that, went out of Europe, and rolled over and took it at Man City away. So, my affection for that particular individual is even lower than it once was. But we can settle those scores next season. I think it was about us that final day and those final few minutes, and I think for a lot of us as well, seeing the players kind of sink to the floor, maybe that took some of us aback a little bit, because as a fan base, I think we all knew what was going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
But you can tell the players, and they have to do this, and I commend them for doing this. They have to believe. They have to believe it's going to happen. And it looked to me like they did. And to them, I say fair play, because that takes a superhuman amount of mental strength to think that Man City's pretty bloodless tank is going to get a blemish on it somewhere. So I think seeing them so upset, like, really got the crowd to kind of try and almost literally pick them up in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I have never seen that before. Kai Havertz scored that goal. My initial reaction was he must know it's a handball or something because he's not celebrating. Now, as it turns out, it wasn't. I think it's just that he was literally on the verge of tears at that point already. He looked like he was going to be sick. They wanted it so bad. And, like, I have to admit, I sometimes fall into the trope of believing, like, the players don't want it the way the fans do. Don't expect a player to be a fan. And players are not fans, of course. But I think these players wanted it more than we did. I think they were extremely invested. And, Bukayo Saka not playing in this game, it made me realize, like, I bet these players are more injured than we think, more tired than we think, carrying more. They emptied the tank so much so that on the final day, Saka just could not do it even one more time. That Ben White had to be subbed off because he could not keep the knee going for 20 more minutes, and thank God we had Jurrien Timber. But, like, I really think these players emptied the tank. I want to talk about the game a bit. It's not much of a game to analyze because it's so inconsequential now, but it is an interesting game, I guess, in some respects. And Clive, we saw a lineup that was a little unusual. We got to see Jurrien Timber play a decent number of minutes. We got to see Martinelli's start on the right. Instead of going into the individual incidents, do you have maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 7 or 100 things from the game do you want to just pick out and call out as interesting observations or interesting things in the game that stand out to you that are worth at least mentioning from a game that will be lost to history a bit?
Yeah, it's lost to history. It's almost lost to my memory because of just how I watched the game. I think the game was all about the last thing we do. It's an exclamation point on the season, and for the last few days now, I can't help but think about next season and how this needs to be better, and using what's happened over the season to try to think how we could be better next season and what to look out for, and look out for the things that we missed as a group of podcasters and supporters that we didn't maybe estimate at the right level, shall we say. But yeah, as a game, the team at this stage of the season, I think the team, it starts to pick itself because you have certain people who are in a playing rhythm that reach a level which is so high that the people who are not playing, they just can't reach, at the most critical moments. And so you often find with most teams, they stabilise towards the end of the season when they find a formula. Man City's team was quite stable for the last few games because it's about levels, and these levels need to be at the peak level when you're making the peak winning time decisions in games, right, which there are many. And so the season then develops in phases, and you're just all about finding your balance, making sure you are efficient with your minutes usage for your squad to end up in a place in the last 7 games where you stabilise on something. And that's where we are. And so the big shock was Saka not playing, and it was a shock just not seeing him there. That's the thing, because he's always there, and the way we play to him and come out from that area is a big part of what we do. And then if you're projecting forward into the horizon, which I tend to do a lot, I almost need something else than that, because if I miss him that much, that means we need to add another dimension to me, and we've seen a dimension of Kai added this year, hence he's very popular at the moment because it's a new dimension stylistically about how we attack. Our defence has created its own identity, which is known now throughout the country about how we work in defence. And the addition of Declan Rice has given us a new identity, a start point in the central midfield areas. So we have a wonderful basis from where to build, based on the identity that we've created over the last 2 years. And I am intrigued, Elliot. This is the thing. I am so intrigued because we have got multifaceted players, multi-positional, that bring a lot of technical, physical, and IQ to this team. I'll be interested to see if we add more of the same multifaceted players, or we then pinpoint one of those key core attributes and say, no, we want to make ourselves more technical or make ourselves more physical or add more intelligence. You see what I mean? Which direction will we go now? Or will we just keep layering on top? Or will we focus on one particular area and say, no, we need more of that. We need to add more energy. We need to add more pace. I'm so intrigued to see how he views the group now from the base layer of the cake to say, right, to win, we need to add this. And that may be in offensive areas, I feel, and central midfield, because I think this last step we make is the step that's going to change our lives. Honestly, it's the step. It's all there now. It's the step. And what does that look like?
Yeah. Any things that stand out from you in the game, Tim, and like maybe not just things that stand out for you in the game, but do you think winning it mattered? I can't articulate why in a logic sense, but I can certainly tell you, I think winning the game mattered a lot. I think to have that final moment of togetherness at full time, for Mikel to be able to step up to the mic and Odegaard to step up to the mic and the lap appreciation, we'll get to the speeches, we'll get to all that, and the feeling we had coming out of that ground. I think winning it mattered to really, I know narrative doesn't get you trophies, but the idea that we pushed it to the end, if we're going to say we won our record number of wins, right, 28 wins and our second most points ever, like you can't say those things. You can't tell yourself those stories if you don't do the job on the final day. And then there would have been the bottle narrative, which, again, nonsense. But so while factually it did not matter, winning felt very important. And it's honestly, it's one of the most important wins of our season for me in some ways, and Kai not celebrating it just made it feel very weird because he was obviously heartbroken. But I'm curious if you agree that it was important we won, and sort of takeaways you have from the game.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Undersign, co-sign everything you said there. I think not just for us as supporters, but for the players to go almost like laying down a bit of a marker for next season. I'm sure that wasn't in the players' minds, but that kind of just letting City know we took it all the way and we were willing to take it to the last second of the last game, and we were prepared, and we didn't cower, and we didn't look at you in the distance. We didn't regard you as an inevitability. We're on you now. I do think that was really important. Just like I said, all narrative, but like I said, clearly those players believed that they were going to win the league, and that tells me that it was important for them to tell themselves, even if it was a bit of a lie, almost, or not a lie, because obviously you have to prepare for that. You have to do that. But that tells me that the mentality of this is important. The fact that they clearly didn't visualize it in their minds as an inevitability. So there's definitely that part to it. I think my only other reflection on the game, really, I guess for a bit more levity, is the whole 2-2 rumor that went round just before half time, which, for me personally, that it's not correct to say it passed me by. I just didn't know what was going on. I didn't think, personally, I don't know about you guys, I didn't think it was 2-2. I thought what had happened was that West Ham scored to make it 2-1, and maybe it got VAR'd and then given. So because I'm over in the East Stand, which is where the connection is total, the connection is basically very difficult in all areas of the stadium. But
I couldn't get internet at all. Yeah, I couldn't get anything in clock end upper here,
because all of the kind of Wi-Fi and everything is over on the west side where the media is and the tunnel is and all of that. So I couldn't be further away from that. So no one around me really knew what was going on, and so I didn't think it was 2-2 personally. I just thought, there was probably a VAR check and it's been given and it is now 2-1. So that stuff is weird. I've been at final days before where false rumours have gone around and stuff. And again, alluding to the last day at Highbury, West Ham had a penalty that day, which for some reason they let Teddy Sheringham take it. I'm sorry, whoever was responsible for that decision at West Ham, I hope that they lost their job that day, because obviously he missed it. But there was a big, West Ham have got a penalty, and so everyone cheered, but then it wasn't scored. Anyway, so there's loads of stuff around the final day, and I was always resolved. I know I'm not going to have any connection. I know no one around me is going to have any connection, so I'm just ignoring it. I'm just focusing on us winning our game. And obviously we didn't do that till, I didn't even realise until I watched the highlights this morning that it was as late as the 91st minute. That goal, I knew it was late. I didn't realise it was literally in stoppage time.
Yeah, 89th, I think, actually.
91st.
91st because
when it was given.
The VAR checks, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I didn't even realise it was that late, to be honest. So it's such a peculiar day when you're in a position where you're relying on another result. And I was there in 99 when it happened, and in the transistor radio era. And Spurs went 1-0 up at United and lost and blah blah blah. So I've been around all of that before, but this one was quite peculiar just because of the lack of connectivity in the stadium. And I know there's a debate, which I get, about do you want greater connectivity in a stadium, and actually a lot of it's around betting. A lot of it is betting companies don't want people with connection in the stadium, because even if you get news out half a second before anyone else, that can impact that kind of stuff. But and usually I don't really care because I'm watching the game. But on a day like this, where it actually matters, it's quite a bizarre experience to not be in control of your own destiny. But I guess also Everton, we've played Sean Dyche teams on the final day 3 or 4 times and always just rolled them over. And this time they didn't do it. This, by the way, the 12th of their 19 away games where Everton have won the toss. and turn the teams round. They do it every single time. 12 of 19. So every time they win the toss away from home, they turn the team's usual ends round. And so it just always felt a little bit bizarre. But even though I never got like a shout of, oh, it's 1-0, like I didn't know City were 1-0 up at any point, but I knew when they were 2-0 up because I could tell, like you could feel it in the stadium. And that's all like, that's a very bizarre experience, and it contributed to quite a bizarre game until I think that explosion of kind of love at the final whistle.
Yeah, I mean, look, not to get stuck into the stats, but this wasn't a close game in terms of the way it was contested. 26 shots and 6 big chances for Arsenal to 5 shots for Everton. 3 expected goals, 3.01 to 0.6 for Everton. We battered them. We absolutely battered them. We came out of the gate really fast and battered them really hard, really early. Then there was a bit of a lull for a while, and then it came back. But Havertz hit the post. I think Havertz also hit the bar. Emil Smith-Rowe, who was cursed, hit the post. We had, I want to say, an Odegaard chance. We just didn't shoot. Like, I don't know what he was doing. He just didn't shoot. Like, he was like 1 yard ahead.
That's a really good reflection, actually, on Smith-Rowe hitting the bar. On what I sorry, Simpsons quote. I know I say this every summer, Bobo. I know I say this every summer, but I think that was probably Emil Smith-Rowe's last game for Arsenal, and I really would have liked that to have gone in for him.
Yeah, it looked like it. El Neni had his arm around him at full time, and they were sort of in their feels. But I do want to call, and by the way, I thought Martinelli had an interesting game. Andrew and I were sat together in Clock End Upper and weirdly sat next to Johan Juru, which was interesting. But, well, the thing with the Martinelli performance, I would say, is he was so involved, but I thought his final ball lacked subtlety or sophistication. There were a lot of just rifled crosses in, really hard hit. Not a lot of the measured pullbacks or the chipped crosses. It was a lot of speed and intent and directness and crosses, but the crosses also reflected that approach. But the player I do want to call out, and I really only think there's one player I want to call out from this game for just a little bit extra, and that's Kai Havertz, because the guy has gone from, a pariah to some people to a clunky fit who was getting the job done to a leader and a hero. And I thought he was our best player. I thought he was everywhere. He fought for absolutely everything. He gave absolutely everything. The guy has emptied the tank of this run-in. I think he's played center forward as well as anyone in the league in 2024, genuinely. And Clive, just, the fact that he scores the last goal of this season, I think is a poignant reflection on his evolution in this club. And for me right now, he is up there with any player for one that I love and appreciate and have affection for what he gave us this season. So I thought he was brilliant. Any thoughts on Kai Havertz from that day?
Yeah, thoughts on Kai Havertz all season, really. This has been his season in some ways. How he started. Let's be honest, he was getting criticised in a skills competition. I mean, that's how
he was really bad in it. Really bad. I mean, I think we are going to want to have a look at that film this summer. We'll do a skills competition rewatch.
Yeah, I think we need to, obviously, because everyone was laughing at him then, and Charity Shield, wherever people were laughing about, they were looking closely. They could see there was a player there, but they focused on the 2 missed chances. When, if you watch that, if you look at the comps out there for that game, the player we see now was in that very first game. So assimilation was obviously a challenge for him in the league game and getting to know our rhythms and movements. And yeah, it's about staying with him. And we said before, didn't we, about supporters staying with him and being true supporters. And then we end up with this guy, and the guy that went to Newcastle away and smashed into them, the guy that put Konate and Van Dijk on their backsides in the Liverpool games and really challenged them. You start to see, hold on a minute here, this is for real. And his energy and marathon man running and just absolute quality has changed our team. It's changed how we attack. It's clear to me that he is it now. This is our centre forward, and we're going to buy another one. It's going to be to play to rest his legs, That's what I'm thinking. I may be wrong. If Isak appears, then we got to do something else, right? He goes back into the line behind, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, by the way. I don't think that's over. So but in my mind, it's how we support him and rest his legs and make sure there are occasions we can rotate, get him off, etc. That's to me is our centre forward. And so watching his trajectory has been wonderful. You touched on Martinelli earlier, and it's quite strange. Sometimes we forget how young Kai Havertz is. He's still very young, 24. Martinelli's quite young. But most of our players mature, Elliot, in a strange way. I almost feel Martinelli's younger at the end of the season than he was at the start of the season. He's lost a bit of maturity to his game. He's starting to turn the corner. Honestly, when you start seeing that level of effort and involvement, that's me thinking, yeah, you're on your way back now. So wherever he was, I think we're finding him again. But if we can talk, if we put the three players together, Martinelli, Jesus, and Kai Havertz, we'd all think, okay, give Kai a bit of time to settle, but Jesus and Martinelli are going to be all right. Well, actually, at the end of the season, if Jesus and Martinelli have the most questions, maybe Jesus even more so, and Kai Havertz, we're just hoping he gets through the Euros in his home country and gets back with a level of rest. Because if he plays like that from the start of next season, we're in a good place. Right? So it's amazing how football can change over the calendar year, but you may want to talk about Jesus a bit later. I'm not too sure, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think the Jesus thing is really just very, very simple for me. I think the degree of criticism of his game has exceeded the reality of his game. I don't think he's had the season we hoped. I think he's been, candidly, not very good. I think he's playing with a knee that is completely screwed up, and he needs surgery this summer. Who knows? He may be having it literally as we speak, and then he needs to rest. He won't be going away with Brazil. And I'll tell you this much, no matter how much you may be out on Gabriel Jesus, you're going to have to find a way back in, because we're going to have to find players who didn't go away with their countries to start next season. If we want to be good, we can't have Bukayo Saka and Kai Havertz and Declan Rice come back from their international tournaments, take 5 days off, start preseason, and start the first game of the season. That's not going to be feasible. And when you have someone as good as Gabriel Jesus can be, you kind of need him to be someone who can do something. This is maybe reaching for a silver lining, but if you list expected goals plus expected assists per 90 this season at Arsenal, number 1 is Bukayo Saka. Number 2 is Gabriel Jesus. Number 3 is Gabriel Martinelli. Okay? Now, XGs and XAs don't get you goals and assists. I get that. But they're just a little bit of a reminder of the involvement of those players. And that it hasn't gone for them this season, but it still could, Clive. And, we had a brilliant season. Those two players had a muted season by their standards. And I think Jesus, we'd say even more than muted, a very disappointing one. But I still think there's reason to believe they can be important parts of an Arsenal that win things,
I totally agree. And they are at the level. They have at the level. They have shown us they're at the level. They just dropped below the level for periods this season. And to be consistent, whenever we talk about certain players that maybe some of us are not so a bit more out on than others, you know what I look for? I always look for how the manager treats them. I look for what he says about them. And when there were rumours about Jesus being sold, by the way, which could happen because it's business, right? And you never know what could happen. There's market opportunities and market opportunities. But when it was broached to him in the press conference, mate, he shut that down big time. He shut it down and said, I don't know where that's come from. And the way he values him is maybe greater than we all do. You know what I mean? I think he values him. He values what he's brought to the club, how he supported him, how he left City to come to him, trusted his project. And knowing the manager as we are starting to get to know him, he's going for a difficult time potentially on the pitch, maybe with his knee. I think he's going to support him through that period, to make sure he comes out the other side. So, Elliot, we have seen the promised land with him, haven't we? We've seen him, and we wouldn't have changed him for a second. We're seeing something else right now, but memories are short. And I'm hoping he comes back. I really am.
Also, let's be clear, guys. There's a big, big difference between Gabriel Jesus being your nailed-on starting center forward and all the responsibilities that go with that, and where Gabriel Jesus finds himself now. Maybe not where he'd like to be, but as a talented player who can give Bukayo Saka a day off, play from the left, or be the center forward if we need him to be. If you're evaluating him in that squad role, he's quite important. And by the way, just think about it this way. Let's say Jesus is fit, right? No knee problems, completely fit. And we're playing a lower third of the table team at home, and Saka's carrying something. And you see Jesus is starting off the right and not Saka. You're not going, oh no, we're screwed. I think we'd all feel like he could do the job. So, it's funny, right? If Leandro Trossard was our nailed-on starting left winger next season, and he has to play 38 games at that position, I'd be like, I don't know if that's good enough. As crazy as it sounds, because he's a brilliant player. But if you say Leandro Trossard is going to be one of our first guys off the bench and first rotation options, I love it. So how you think about a player often is defined by what their role is in the team. And so I guess there is one last player to mention from this game, Tim, and that is Jurrien Timber, who comes back, makes one of the latest clumsiest challenges we saw this season as he struggled to get up to the tempo of the game. That was pretty funny, I thought. But you can just see the intention to play, the attacking dimension of his game. At points he was standing inside the penalty area in the left half space, and he was playing like basically where Odegaard usually stands. It is interesting that he came on for Ben White, who I think has been carrying something, as I said, for weeks. You see the strapping on his leg, in training photos and stuff. It also makes you wonder, was he brought to be a right back? Let's face it, he was a right back. Left back is a position he made his. I don't think Ben White's going anywhere. He is our starting right back, but it'll be interesting to see if Timber is just what we all assume, which is, nailed on left back. That's what he's going to be next season. We'll see. But thoughts on Timber? I think a beautiful opportunity for him to be lustily cheered by the crowd and have one final appearance on the final day, which it's funny, if you go back and listen to podcasts from earlier this season, I think a number of times we said if he appears at all, it might be a cameo on the final day, and that's how it played out.
Yeah. And I kind of think that also tells you that Arteta knew which way the day was going at that point as well. And sometimes on the final day, you get people off to get their round of applause. And Ben White certainly deserved that. But I was very enthused by Timber's, by his cameo. Actually, he looked plenty strong to me. He's just got that. Given that the guy's played 65 minutes of Premier League football this season, very enthused by all of it. I have to say, he just looks like he's got that real oxish, bullish kind of quality, just really, really almost like boxer physique. Just barrels through people. And when he went into that tackle, and by the way, that's a big moment for a player coming back from an ACL as well. That first 50-50 they get into where the knee jars a little bit, and didn't look like he had any problem whatsoever going into that to me. And that's a really positive sign, because usually that first one, players will tell you the first one, it goes through their mind. And for some players, it never leaves them. But that was his first one. Didn't look a problem to me. So yeah, I think it's, I think in many ways we probably have missed Timber. Well, we certainly missed Timber. In many ways we haven't, because Ben White has been so good and so durable. He's made it less of a problem. But essentially, we're in that weird hinterland where last season doesn't mean the same thing anymore. But when I say last season, I mean 22-23. We had to flog Ben White, and I don't think Arteta wanted to do that again. But because of the Timber injury, he had to again. And I don't know where Timber will play most of his minutes, but maybe it is competition and rotation for Ben White, so that he doesn't have to play every minute of every game again. Good cover at centre-back. Maybe it is left-back. I don't know. Maybe it'll be all and none of those things, but it's another body. It's another, it's more competition. And something Clive said at the live shows really made me think over the last couple of days. I think we can shed some players from this squad and not replace them. I think we're in that kind of healthy place now. So even if someone like Zinchenko were to go, and let's face it, since the Villa game, he has been a very peripheral figure, and that to me suggests that Arteta lost patience with him over that game, over maybe a couple of incidents in that game. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see him go if there's an offer, blah, blah, blah. But I look at that now and I kind of think, it'd be nice to sign a left back, but I wouldn't be that troubled if we didn't, if we just like sold that player. And, you know, players like Nelson and Nketiah, Smith Rowe, we don't need 3 players if all of those go.
No.
Like maybe 1, really. And so we're in a healthy position where we're looking at the squad just getting a bit leaner. And we are going to have to be prepared for the fact that spending regulations mean that even the Premier League now, you're not going to get as much money as you like. The market's a bit different now. But if we can sell 3 or 4 players that we don't have to replace, then it's all profit, basically, at the end of the day. So I think that's the really nice position we're in now, where it's like we can shed 4 or 5 players and we might only have to buy 1, to just bring the quality of that squad up. And I think that in defence as well. And Timber next season is going to literally be like a new signing.
He will indeed. I want to talk about the speeches, lap appreciation, and then a bit on how our second place finish is being covered versus how we think about it. Maybe some of the Rodri quotes as well, because I think they're just insane. I want to make sure I make that point. But before I do that, I want to mention one other player. If you told me that going into the 2023-24 season, Arsenal will have a 22-year-old starting center back, and he will play every single minute of every single Premier League game, I would have said, and then asked me for a prediction, I would have said, well, probably growing pains. So might be a season where we conceded a lot of goals. In fact, we conceded the fewest goals in the league, the lowest expected goals against in the league, the most clean sheets in the league. And William Saliba played every single minute of every single game. Bukayo Saka is our player of the season. And if it's not him, it might be Odegaard or Rice. But really, the center back who played every single minute of every single game for the team with the best defense in the entire league, who also probably played more passes than anybody on the entire team, that guy might be him. And, it may be the case that in all of the players we love, and we love William Saliba, we may have lost how special he is a little bit by loving Saka and Rice and Odegaard and Kai as much as we have. I said to Andrew on Sunday, I miss the Saliba song. It doesn't go up much anymore. And I think he's just, I mean this in a positive way, I think he's almost taken for granted.
The song's too long. That's the issue.
Yeah.
A lot of the player songs we have are good, but they're very long and difficult to get going.
Yeah, it's not punchy. You gotta get to Saliba. Like, it takes forever to get to the Saliba part. But my point is, I think we've taken for granted this player, and I think the sign of great players is you take them for granted. They're just going to be there. They're going to play well. They're going to pass the ball well. They're going to defend well. They're going to, think of the amount of times we've wrung our hands being like, oh, Saliba wasn't at his best today. What? Because he had one tackle that wasn't perfect. You know what I mean? We just expect clinical perfection from this 22-year-old, now 23-year-old center back. And he is staggeringly good and staggeringly young. And that's the thing. Players like Kai Havertz, you think, well, he's a journeyman. He's a veteran. He's 25. He just went 25. There's so much more to come. Wouldn't be fair if I didn't tell you to shave your privates. That wouldn't be fair. Who would that be fair to? No one. So I'm going to tell you to shave your privates. Please shave your privates. There you go. Father's Day is coming up, at least in the States. Don't know where that is in other places. But Father's Day is coming up. You're not going to believe the copy they've given me. Never forget where you came from. I mean, come on. That just turned my stomach just thinking about that. But I would say this. I would say Manscaped products are fantastic Father's Day gifts. If you have a dad that you want to give gifts to, if you are a dad and you want to give a gift to yourself, if your partner is a dad and you want to give a gift to them, what's made Manscaped great is not just that they make great products, but they've expanded to grooming basically the whole of body hair. So you can get, obviously, the lawnmower 5.0 with the foil blades, and I can go completely smooth, works in the shower. If you have a razor in the shower that you've been using for 6 months, just go buy the lawnmower, okay? The battery life lasts forever. You can travel with it. It's brilliant, okay? So you have that. You can do your chest with that as well. But then there's the beard hedger, which is a phenomenal beard trimming tool. There's the handyman, which is a face shaver. I like that because when I'm traveling, I take it to very small, very long battery life. It just makes it easy to do that on the go shaving stuff. They have the shears. Tanya, my wife, my lovely wife, gets so mad at me because if I need to cut a nail or do a cuticle thing, I'm always taking her nail stuff and then I lose it, obviously, and she can't find it. The shears, It's awesome. It's 5-piece precision nail grooming kit. It comes in its own little kit that like magnetizes closed, easy to keep all together. There's the Boxers 2.0, which I use when I work out because they're incredibly comfortable in the way they need to be comfortable for a workout. So they got a little bit of everything. Get 20% off free shipping with code ArsenalVision at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use code ArsenalVision. Never forget where you came from. It says it right there, if you know what I mean. Happy Father's Day from Manscaped. And this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is not just therapy online. It is therapy that happens to be online. Didn't say that the way I meant to say that, but you get the idea. The idea is that when you need someone to talk to, friends are a good place to go, partners, good place to go, parents or children, good place to go. But really, working through issues that are on your mind, weighing on your mind, that's not necessarily the thing that you're meant to do with friends and partners and children and things like that and parents. So you can use BetterHelp, and it means you don't have to get in a car and drive to an office. And, this is the thing, whether you think that, going to an office and finding a therapist in an office is the right way to do it for you. You should do that for sure. But I know there are a lot of people that either don't have one nearby or can't spare the time or the cost is too great and still want a way to work through the issues that are standing in their way. And with BetterHelp, you can do that. It's flexible. It's convenient. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. That's betterhelp.com/vision today to get 10% off your first month. Visit BetterHelp, betterhelp.com/vision. Glad? Is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Nailed it. Okay. Let's do the speeches and the end game bit here a little, and then we'll reflect just a bit. Obviously, we're going to do a whole postseason review. One of my favorite shows is revisiting our predictions from preseason and seeing what we got right and what we got wrong. And I think for a lot of us, we got a lot more right than I would have expected. Maybe some of the individual player stuff wrong, but the team stuff quite a bit right. And it'd be interesting to measure. It's always fun to measure results versus expectations, but Clive, the atmosphere at the Emirates was electric. As we talked about at full time, I was just so blown away by the love and support that just carried through at full time. Odegaard spoke, Mikel spoke. Both seemed like they were breaking up a little bit. Like not that they didn't want to speak, but they wanted to get through it because I think the emotion was overwhelming to them. Anything you took away from the speeches? I have one thing from Mikel's that I would probably call out, but what about you? What about you from the speeches and the lap of appreciation?
Yeah, I think from a crowd noise perspective, there were noises in that ground and levels of noise that I've never heard before. A couple of songs sung just before kickoff were the loudest I've ever heard. I quite clearly say that without any qualms. And towards the end, another high volume level of noise. And that will stay with me massively. And obviously when the speeches happened, I think that people were singing his name, etc., Mikel's name. And I just thought, you know what? Is he emotional? Is that the mic cutting out? I felt, this is serious. This is serious. And obviously you're in the ground this time, so you have a different view. You could see the second goal. So you walk away with that impression. You also walk away with the impression of the Everton fans, which I could not hear. So I have no impression of them. So you have a different day to me. I was at the other end of the ground, and all I got was absolute 1000% support. No dramas, no heartbreak, just no nothing. Just full on. And I just couldn't see some of the things that you've seen that maybe left an impression on you. I couldn't see the players sad on the floor until I looked at TV afterwards, So I just didn't have that feeling, and so to me, I thought the way the Mikel and Martin spoke was it's what I expected from two high quality individuals, right? That's what you're going to get. They're high quality individuals that believe in what they're trying to do, and the sense of this is not over. The Odegaard said, I'd like to come back to training almost immediately, something like that. That's what I want to hear. I don't want to see this team damaged or this club damaged or any supporters damaged, because we haven't beaten Man City. Let's we're going to break that down, no doubt. But so what, right? Until this league and this country understand, let's talk the league first. Until the league understand the psychological hold they have over the rest of the league, they need to fix that, because there are many teams that don't even try to play them. They need to fix that. Don't sit there and moan about their charges, and when they turn up at your place, you don't bother to play them. Play them for real. You play us. Play them for real. That hold over the league is false. We call this league the most competitive league in the world. It's not competitive if you don't compete every single team because you think they're different. When we compete in Man City now, I don't think we think they're different. I don't think our players think they're any better than us. Our players believe they're as good as them. And for many points this year, the data, Elliot, we are as good as them. We didn't quite have it. So that's what's behind the sadness because they look at everything. That's what's behind here. But I thought they handled themselves beautifully. I thought he transmitted to the crowd for where I was really, really well. And I walked away from those speeches feeling as proud as I felt throughout the entire weekend that we are in the right place for us, the right people. And all I want to do now is dream about new signings, dream about how we're going to get better. And the weekend that we had this weekend, just put a little bit on top because it's coming.
Yeah, I mean, look, the goal is to win the title, period. End of story. I look at the Manchester City fans and the scenes, and it's all a bit pantomime. And I look at the scene at the Emirates and the way the crowds of people outside the ground, and by the way, not just in London, the pictures of supporters groups all over the world. And I'm not sure you'd want to be any other group of supporters right now. The ultimate final thing you get to hoist up and celebrate. Do I want a title celebration? Of course I do. I'm just not sure I'd want to trade places with any group of supporters right now. And to your point, Clive, about how you experienced the day, it was so perfect in so many ways, but sat right behind us. There were a lot of very, very intoxicated people because the kickoff time was maybe, just that 1 hour later, and the expectation of the day, people had gotten to pubs a little earlier. And the guy behind you, fucking do something. Come on. Fuck, what's wrong with you guys? Just the whole game. And so that kind of puts you in a bad place. And then really getting into it with the Everton fans, with the fruity language. So
I didn't have any of that, mate.
There was a lot of
any of that. So to me, it was just one big sunny celebration, and that's it, really.
He was the only one, to be fair. He was the only one. Tim, the thing that stood out for me from the speech is not much, because I was kind of in my feels at that point and just soaking it all up. But the thing that did stand out to me, Mikel said something that is so Mikel, and I loved it. I loved it because it's the perfect note to strike. Complete gratitude and appreciation, but let's not settle for this. He was very clear to say that. Let's not settle for this. He does not want this to be beautiful failure. He wants this to be success. And that's why I had said, I think, on the instant reaction, which, by the way, if you want to listen to that, that's the four of us at the pub after the game. And I think it's actually one of the most fun instant reactions we've ever done. But I think this is a beautiful, unfinished story, right? A beautiful, unfinished story. And that's the tone that he struck, right? A beautiful story, but not finished, not written. There's something about a season, the finality of it. I think what hit me, one of the reasons for the sadness I've communicated, Clive, I'm not sad about Arsenal. It occurs to me I don't get to see this season anymore. You know what I mean? And the expectation that next season will just pick up right where we left off and be brilliant. It'll be brilliant at times. It'll have its ups and downs. It's how this works. This season is one I'm glad it's over in a way, because I don't know if I could have ridden this emotion much longer. But the end of it is all of a sudden I realize we don't get this season anymore. We've just won 17 of 19 games in the running, Clive.
Yeah, but we get something else, didn't we? I mean,
yeah, it's exciting.
This is it, right? This is we have a discussion. We have met some lovely people this weekend. There's some great discussions, and I was saying to people, I wonder if I'm addicted to the journey, right? And I'm almost, is there a bit of me? So if we win, then what happens? Actually, the journey continues. It continues in a different way, And I think that the journey doesn't stop, Elliot. It's a new journey starts, mate. Transfer window. I'm on it. Do you know what I mean? I'm on it. There's things breaking right now that are exciting. I'm on it, and that's creating the new journey. I can't wait. I can't wait to see this squad constructed. We're going on a pre-season tours. We're going to LA this summer. I can't wait. I'm already excited about it. What that's going to be like. Honestly, I just love it. I love the journey that we're all on, and who we're sharing it with, including you two, I'm afraid. We're sharing it with. It's absolutely the best Arsenal period of my life. So this season stops. A new one starts almost immediately with a break, and I just can't wait for it.
Yeah, well said. So Tim, Thoughts on that, on Mikel telling us it's a beautiful story, but that we shouldn't settle for it, and where we go from there.
Yeah, sure. What Clive said just reminded me of that thing the Joker says in The Dark Knight, where he's like, I'm a dog chasing a car, and if I ever caught it, I wouldn't know what to do with it type thing.
Brilliant.
It's the chase that's the kind of exciting bit. I mean, I guess, and Clive, you might remember this. Probably I was alive, but very young, too young to remember it really. Like the beginning of the George Graham era and like the Littlewoods Cup in '87.
I remember it. I was there.
That was the launch pad. That was the precursor. I think in this day and age, the League Cup doesn't serve that purpose anymore. I don't think the League Cup is a launch pad for anything in 2024. This almost felt like our Littlewoods Cup in a way, like bringing it to the last day and just having that experience as a young team and all of the stuff that came before Anfield '89 happened and that good feeling you had with a young team. I thought there were few really interesting things about Mikel's speech, much shorter this year than last year. And I do think that is probably because last year they had a lot longer to come to terms with not winning it, whereas this time it was much more raw and much more emotional. And you could tell that he didn't want to talk too much because, he was beginning to choke up a little bit. But it's really interesting that there are two things that are really interesting. Like you said, Elliot, where he said, like, don't settle for this, but as a message to the fans, because I'm sure he said that to the players, and I'm very comfortable with the idea that message will be delivered and shared by the players and everything, but it's really interesting to say that to the fans. And actually, weirdly, he said something really similar to what Jurgen Klopp said. If you listen to Jurgen Klopp's speech, at Anfield on his final game, and he said something like, he talked about the fans believing, and he said believing is an active thing that you did. It wasn't because I told you to do it, you did it, like you believed, and that was like really significant. And like Arteta said something similar, right? I found that really interesting. They both said similar things where he said, like, you began to believe in what we were doing, you began to show that kind of patience. I mean, first of all, it also probably, if you really want to wind back, speaks to the significance of his bad period coming when there was no one in the stadium, and perhaps being inured to all of that. But the fact that the belief of the supporters is something that's an active part of this and not just a nice to have, that he believes and Jurgen Klopp believes, and it's not lip service. It's not, I don't want you booing me and I don't want you calling me a tosser while I'm on the touchline. That there is something, even if it's 1 or 2%, there is something fundamental about the belief of the people in the stadium that really matters, that he thinks is a fundamental part of this. And I really hope that when he goes home and reflects and maybe has his holiday, maybe happening right now, a bit of a remove, that maybe he looks back at what happened at the final whistle with the supporters. I love the idea that he might show that to them on the first day of pre-season and say, look at the belief that your people still have in you, and take that and use it as kind of fuel for next season. If we know many things about Arteta by now, it's that he will use every single thing, every push, every margin to his advantage. And I love the idea that he actually believes the belief and support of the fans is a part of this, and that he might give that message to his players too. And as a fan, that's really gratifying to believe, even if you have like even if you're like the appendix, no one really knows what you're there for. The fact that you're an active part of this is really meaningful. I think that's a really great message to give the supporters as well.
Clive, you want to just add any final thoughts on that in particular, the speeches and that moment?
Yeah, I just think there was a determination in their voices, wasn't there? Really, to go and get the next thing. And we said at the weekend, don't be satisfied, and that seems to be the message coming out. We're not done, are we? We're not done. We're reading things. We're not done, and that's all. That's all I want to hear. Many years we've been doing this podcast, Elliot, and there were times we'd query if we were even trying. we're trying now. We're being criticised for trying hard, for trying to create something, trying to create something we can all believe in. We're getting criticised for it, aren't we, mate? Honestly, it concerns me. I don't care as long as we try hard, try our absolute best in a way that I can see and I understand and I like the values that and by the way we're operating. If I see that, you got me. It's very, very simple. And so to hear those messages straight away that they weren't done, they're not tired, not damaged, that's what I wanted to see. The rest is down to the experts to put this all together. And I just said at the weekend, sorry, one last thing. There are players that are moving on, potentially, that have been here a long time. And when you work in a football club or you're part of that dressing room, it's a very, what's what I'm looking for, very family environment. It's quite small, it's quite intense. There's a small group of people who are very privileged to walk through those gates and play for the club. And when you see people that are leaving, whether you think they're good players or not, doesn't matter. They've been here for many, many years. And they've brought an energy to the club. They brought themselves to the club. So when you see almost family members potentially walking away, I wonder about the impact of that. I know they're professionals, they've got to recover. But walking away, not back in that dressing room again, and then a new subset of players that are going to come in, and what do they bring in? So they're names to us, but we're talking about people that have been in that club potentially since they were 10 years of age. That's a long time. It's going to have an impact to the environment. So that's something to watch out for.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I mean, and if someone like a Smith Rowe goes, for example, which may be best for his career and best for everyone, what does that do, to a Bukayo Saka if they've been together on this journey, obviously linked together in their song, things like that. So it can have an impact on players and their comfort level in the dressing room. I mean, we saw Xhaka move on. He was a big, big presence in the dressing room. Obviously, other leaders stepped up. So you just have to hope that the leadership and camaraderie is there to be able to move forward. By the way, as we're recording, the England squad breaking, and obviously Ben White not in it, which is great. Saka, Rice, and Ramsdale are. Rashford not in it, interestingly. So that's, a big call from Southgate. And I will just say that we will have a Euro Daily again this year. This time it'll be on the Football Vision feed. We'll throw a few of them on this feed, but Phil and I sometimes, but Phil and people more knowledgeable than I will be taking you through the Euros once again and Copa America content. So I think it's great. I saw Phil this weekend. I think his dad is younger than me. So if Phil can't keep up with a daily podcast, then he's living too hard. And he's moved to Barcelona. He'll have the sunshine in his face. I have absolutely no sympathy for the young man whatsoever. Brilliant to meet his dad as well, by the way. Okay, as we start to wrap up here, Tim, it is fascinating to me how much it makes other club fans happy that we didn't win the title. And it really just does underscore the extent to which no one cares about Manchester City. The catastrophe seems to be for United fans, for Liverpool fans, for Spurs fans, of course, you understand that, for Chelsea fans, would have been Arsenal winning the title. And I think Clive has said it, you've said it, it is absolutely because it forces you, first of all, to reflect on your club, that your club could have done it and didn't. And that, much in the way I was full of praise for Liverpool when they were going toe-to-toe for City, because they did it. Look, none of these are small clubs. None of these are poor clubs. None of these are clubs without money and resources. So I don't want to make it sound like this is David and Goliath financially, but it is David and Goliath in the sense of following certain financial rules and principles. And so it is interesting. It just doesn't seem to matter. Does it bother you? Do you engage with? Do you care about the fact that there's just this endless effort to criticize Arsenal? And it is so funny watching people flail around for that you bottled it or this narrative or that narrative, because it's so hard to do that this season. We actually dropped fewer points in 2024 than City. We dropped 5, they dropped 6. We won 17 of 19 on the run-in, 51 of 56 points or something like that. It is a standard that I am proud of no matter what. If you want to point to where the season was lost per se, I'm not pointing to the Etihad. I'm not pointing to the Villa game. I'm pointing to the earlier part of the season and the time it took us to sort of find the click and find the right pattern. But every season is a bit of a journey. But do you engage with it all or find yourself in any way impacted by just the intensity with which other fans seem to be celebrating Arsenal not doing it, and therefore sort of in some ways rubber stamping this hollow simulacrum of joy and success that City have.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fine. I mean, first of all, I think we should take a separation between engagement farmers on on Twitter and like the real world and all of that. And all of the generalist football podcasts I've listened to in the wake of the weekend have all had exactly the same conversation with exactly the same conclusion. And the conversation they're all having is, why does nobody care about Manchester City? And they're all having that discussion. And they're all tabling it. I don't think that's being dodged as well. And I think we all know the reasons why, the fairly bloodless way it's been put together. Usually when a team is very, very successful, Liverpool in the 80s, Man United in the 90s, everyone hates them. I don't think anyone hates Man City. I think it leaves most people feeling cold. And, you know, there is a fairly like bloodless kind of way it's all been put together, the way the team play, and this part here should not bother Man City fans one iota, but the rest of us, you look at it, it's very Jeopardy-less football. It's not very exciting to watch, and you know, I in my bitterer moments have been joking about like Phil Foden winning Player of the Year, and like, how would anyone know if a Man City player is Player of the Year? Because nobody watches Man City other than the 2 times a year they play against them. And so there is like a bloodlessness to it. And like I said, that's a problem for us in a sporting sense because they don't really have those games where teams really want to beat them. So I kind of take a bit of a separation from that. I'm fine with other fans kind of not wanting Arsenal to win it, not just because, you know, they're all nerds like us who want to reflect on their own teams and what they have and haven't done. It's just, we mean something. Our football club means something. That success would mean something, just like Liverpool, just like Manchester United. As much as we might have our issues with those teams and their fans sometimes, when they do stuff, it means something. This doesn't mean anything. I think we all recognise that Manchester City is a host, and that's all it is. That could have been any club. That could have been any club. They are the host that has been... I don't want to use language like invaded, but do you know what I mean? They're a shell basically, and everyone recognises that. And the thing is, well, City don't really have the size of fan base to really kick back against that either. So you don't even get, like, if you say a bad word against Liverpool or Arsenal or Man United, you'll hear about it. You'll hear about it all the time. You won't with City. It's like shouting into the void, quite frankly. So there is like all of the people, a lot of the, I'd say, you know, the intelligent people, the journalists and the broadcasters that I care about and take notice of are all of the kind of same opinion that it just doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't feel, we know objectively history is being made by Man City, but no one really cares about it. I don't think anyone's going to talk about anything they've done like they do the Invincibles or United's treble winning team. Look at the way their team won the Champions League final with 2 stoppage time goals from substitutes. You don't get that from Man City, and so there is like a bloodlessness to it, as it were. But you know, I feel that kind of bitterness. I have read the charges and, you know, the leaked emails that have been produced and all of that. And it's very serious. It's very serious indeed. And the Premier League understands this. That is why they have thrown so much at City. And there's a massive, massive misunderstanding about what all this is about, because everyone's going, oh, the Premier League won't punish them. The Premier League has. The Premier League is the one that's thrown all the charges at them. It is now out of their hands. It's in the hands of an independent commission. The Premier League has thrown 115 charges at this club. That means they take this seriously. And like I said to you over the weekend, I don't honestly think that's because all of a sudden the Premier League has a massive conscience about where money comes from. I think they're concerned about the product, quite frankly. And I think they're thinking, like, we can't have this anymore. We can't have this anymore because it's damaging to the overall product. And one of the very interesting things that the new spending regulations is seeking to do is tying everything to the central revenue, so that, mentioning no names, certain teams can't say we've got a 700 billion sponsorship deal with an airline, for example, and we've got 500 million members and stuff like that. Like, tying it to central Premier League income, that's very deliberate. It's very deliberate at clipping the wings of certain clubs. So there is stuff happening that the Premier League and the competing teams recognise, and whether we recognise the ins and outs of it, the accounting tricks, the language, blah, 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 everyone on a sporting and emotional level is responding to this in a pretty similar way. And I think that tells you a lot. But as a club, Mikel, etc., they can't linger on that. And we also have to be honest and say, this struck me. I was in Arteta's press conference on Friday. He was on the Man City staff. He's benefited from that. He's got a couple of Premier League winners' medals, so he's not separate from it. And that makes it a bit interesting. But maybe that plays into our hands because the manager isn't lingering on that and looking for excuses. But we're not the ones competing next season. I think we can gaze at our neighbours a bit over it.
I can totally understand why anyone wants to point to Manchester City's 115 charges. They are important and they need to be dealt with. I sort of need to separate myself from that because it is outside of our control and our analysis. And Arsenal Football Club do not have the choice to compete with that. What they can compete with is what Manchester City do on the pitch. And we have no choice, much as Liverpool have no choice. If they wind up vacating every one of Manchester City's titles for the last decade, Liverpool will have quite a few more, but they won't have more parades. They won't have more celebrations. They won't have more days out where they celebrate it.
The other thing, Elliot, that the Premier League don't want, they don't want people like Jurgen Klopp leaving the league, complaining of emotional exhaustion. And, look, hands up, an amazing manager. He's done an amazing job and he's got one Premier League title and he's leaving because he's exhausted. That is not good either.
Yeah, it's just the fact that we have to beat them on the pitch. And I understand every reason if you want to point to the other stuff and say, but that's why we can't. I have all the sympathy and understanding of that in the world. I can't engage with it because it frustrates me too much because then it's a throw your hands up and quit moment. And Mikel can't do that and the players can't do that. And I don't want us to do that. So yeah, if you have to go win 29 games to be to be champions, I hate to fucking say it, but you got to go win 29 games. And our analysis should be, how do we get to 29? How do we get to 30? Liverpool fans will tell you that might not be enough because they once got 97 points, didn't win a title. So yeah, it's outrageous, but I will choose to engage with the football component of it because the other component of it is too frustrating, but also too illusory, too not illusory, but outside of the sphere of control and analysis we can do, Clive.
Yeah, but I'm afraid it does bleed into analysis, though, whether we like it or not. Although I agree with what you said there, Elliot. I can't watch football that way. I need to look at us and make sure that we're good and focus on us and focus on how we feel on that journey, right? But you said it earlier. When Sleeper makes one mistake, we say, oh, why about Sleeper? That's in the context of the bar that's been set by this team.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We've had many discussions about players, and I say, man, lads, don't worry about it. He just got beat. But you're not really you're not thinking the player got beat. You're thinking he got beat, but if we lose this game, we lose 2 points against that team. So it does bleed into how we look at the team. And we happen to be mature men that can be constructive about it, but not everyone else is. Not everyone's constructive. That's all. There's a world out there called the internet. Not everyone's constructive, and because of the bar they're set, we're fighting against Chelsea. They got a couple of players I quite like. We couldn't afford to buy them. We had to loan our goalkeeper because we couldn't afford to spend the full fee. Chelsea have done their money, spent £1 billion, and sold a hotel to correct their numbers. I'm not sure if that's validated yet, but that shows you they're doing things within the rules. So that the Premier League needs to tighten up its rules so that we have a chance to compete on a fair playing ground. And people will say, well, you've got more money, you would say that. But my view is, I just want a chance to compete so the league looks like it's normal. Because it doesn't feel that way. And it's been going on since Abramovich landed, right? And we've become immune to it. I heard something the other day, and I'm paraphrasing. If this was in Germany, they wouldn't allow it to happen because every single fan of every single away team would absolutely murder Man City. Example, they would make sure that every single ground there'd be a force waiting for them. What do? We accept it. We actually feel okay about it because we know we can't compete with them. What do the media do? They celebrate them and they mock the teams that can't get to their numbers, right? So we have a problem here that's brewing. Forget if it could be Man City, it could be Chelsea, it could be Man United, it could be anybody. We have a problem that's brewing here about the game's perception and how we accept what's happening. And I'm a guy that accepts stuff. I don't protest. We're all like that. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. Yeah. There are many people like that. But I do think there needs to be a line drawn soon because Tim made a great point there about Klopp. That can't happen. That can't happen. It's a real milestone moment.
Yeah. And I am minded, by the way, of the quote that all that is needed for evil men to succeed is for good men to do nothing. There are people out there that need to do the work to expose this and make sure that there are consequences. And I have no doubt that is happening. So I'm not saying put your head in the sand and pretend it isn't happening. Please don't take what I'm saying to be that. I am simply saying that until something is done, I don't want I don't want moral victories. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I don't want to watch football through those eyes. Yeah, I know what you mean, Elliot.
No,
I know what you mean.
I don't want the moral victory of being like, well, we are the best if you discount what they did. It's true, but I want the real victory, right? And we came so close, and we're just going to have to push further on to do that. And I just want to touch on this real quick. Tim, it was inevitable in the wake of losing out by this little, that there will be an effort to point to the thing we did wrong that cost us, right? Oh, it's the Villa game. Oh, it's it's this, it's that. We won 17 of 19 on the run-in. You should be champions. We won 28 games in a 38-game season. You should be champions. We're not. I am not necessarily minded to say we did anything wrong because I don't know that you can ask this squad at this level of its development to go win 29 freaking football games. The one thing that Rodri said is, they came to the Etihad and they, with no intention of player to win. And we knew after that point that, we could win the title because they didn't have the mentality. First of all, it makes no sense because after that game, it was for discounting Liverpool for a second, it was in our hands. They couldn't catch us, right? We had one slip up, so they wound up catching us. But to say that the mentality is wrong, their mentality is wrong. They had to win that game. We did not. The other thing is we took 4 points from them. The other thing is, as you pointed out, they came to the Emirates and had no shots after the 34th freaking minute. And it's the weirdest thing because no one says, Pep parked the bus at the Emirates. They parked it more than we did. And by the way, I don't think we parked the bus at the Etihad. I think what happened is we didn't want to lose it and we wanted to play on the counter and we wanted to try to beat them, but they're very good. And we weren't able to do some of the things we would have liked to do. And not because we didn't want to do them, but because, you know what, Rodri? Your team's real good. You're real good at football. We went to your place where no one wins with an intention to make sure we don't lose and then try to play on the counter. And you were just very, very good. And we weren't able to execute the things we necessarily wanted to do. I don't think Mikel went there and said, don't score a goal. But if you can't win it, don't lose it. And by not losing it, you keep the title in your hands. So I don't want to engage with the idea that there was a mistake made that cost us the title, because if Son finishes a 1v1 in the 85th minute, everyone's going by being able to depend on their robust defense at the Etihad. Arsenal won the title, right? Or, Declan Rice's header against Luton won them the title. We'd be talking about the moments that won us the title. Declan Rice winner against United, right? The Kai Havertz winner against Everton, right? The 89th minute won us the title. But because we fell just short, there's going to be this inquest into the things that cost us the title. And what cost us the title is a team got 2 more points. We won 28 games. So it's a long, long rambling way of saying I don't accept the premise that Rodri sets forward, and I don't accept the premise that there was an error that cost us the title, because when you win 28 of 38 games in a Premier League, that is roughly as good as you can ask a team to be. And then the chips have to fall where they may.
Yeah. I mean, we talked earlier about the Arsenal players clearly having to convince themselves it was on right to the end. So it's not so much I have a problem with what Rodri says, because players have to convince themselves all sorts of bullshit.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And like, I'm sure if you play for Pep Guardiola, again, did you see that there was a Trent Alexander-Arnold quote about Klopp, and he said, if Klopp told me it was snowing outside, I wouldn't look out the window. I'd believe him. So like, athletes have to do that nonsense and convince themselves that, monster mentality and all of that. My issue is more with other people picking that up. And people who don't look into things like, what was Man City's record against the top five? They didn't beat Arsenal. They didn't beat Liverpool. They lost away at Villa, and then they beat Aston Villa's reserves at home because Unai Emery quit on that game because he's a quitter. And they drew at home to Tottenham, and they beat Tottenham away. So they won 2 against the top 5 this season. If you really want to boil it down, it's because they managed to beat up on everyone else. And we didn't beat up on Fulham, and we had a freak game at home to West Ham. I'm kind of almost prepared to write that West Ham game off, much in the way that City lost away at Wolves, and it was a freak kind of result. I wouldn't read anything into that for City. It's just, you get one of those in a season. So really, it's that they beat up on the little guys a bit better than we did. And we still did it well because we had a better goal difference than them at the end of the season, which is pretty remarkable. So, no, I'm with you. I don't buy into any of that at all. And for me, again, talking about, I hope there's 2 things from the final day that Arteta shows his players over the summer, Clockwork Orange style, the reception the fans gave, and I hope he shows them that Rodri interview, and I hope he says, he thinks you're weak, they think you're weak, show them they're wrong, show them they're wrong. And so it's just a convenient, slightly dumb explanation for what actually happened. And yeah, I don't read too much into that. And to, I guess to flip on what I was saying earlier, like, in many respects, I think City need someone to push them in title races, because the 1 year they messed up, there was no title race.
Yeah.
Basically, like, Liverpool won it by March. I almost feel like City are they're like this kind of Terminator thing, where if you get 104 points, they'll get 105. Like, there's almost like, I think they need that. They almost need that tension. They've come to rely on it. But for us, like, with the ceiling being as high as it is, I think if you still need, in a world where you need 80 points to win the league, I don't think we get 89 this year. It's because the bar is that high that we've gone that high, and we know we have to go a little bit higher. And, if we were in the 78 point era, I don't believe that we'd be winning the league by 10, 11 points. I think. And it's the same for Liverpool, right? Liverpool did put up 97. They did put up 99. The year they won it, they won 26 of their first 27 games. Like, that's having the bar that high makes you stretch to reach it. And that's what we've got to do. And that's what I think we will try to do.
Yeah, and ultimately, here's the reality, right? I'm not going to point to an individual game because that's silly. Like, pointing to an individual game and saying that's the one that cost us is sort of saying you should never drop points. It's essentially saying you should win 38 games. Because if you won 37, you could be like, that game we lost was the one that cost. Well, of course the game you lost is the one that cost you, but you're going to lose games unless you're the Invincibles. But I would say this...
Sorry, I was going to say, and we'll go over this a lot in the summer, you've got to keep it at themes. That's what you've got to look at. We didn't score in 5 league games. We didn't score an open play goal at Bayern, at Porto. Liverpool, we score from a set piece at Man City, at Villa. Like, that's, again, we're talking ridiculous margins, but we didn't score an open play goal on any of those grounds. That's where that's what you look at.
My theme would be our worst performances of the season, and the times we looked most vulnerable to dropping points were when we played 3 days apart. it happened around the Christmas program, right? That's when we had our wobble. And it happened between the legs of the Bayern tie is when we had another wobble. And so this summer for me, and Clive pointed it out, we're not going to miss Nelson's minutes because there weren't any. We're not going to miss Smith Rowe's minutes because there were very few. We're not going to miss Eddie's minutes because in the last 6 months or, 4 months, he's played about 100 of them. We need to have a few more Trossards in the team. We need to have a few more players who, if they start on short, when the team is on short rest, we don't lose our offensive power. That when we have to play Villa between playing Bayern, we can play different players and not dip level. When we go into the holiday program, we lost this title around Christmas, if you do want to play that game. And the reason is we lost our offensive power at a time when we were still not at our peak. So that for me, so Clive, the big question for you that we end on is, are you going to be okay if we talk about transfers for a few months now? Are you going to be okay?
I can't wait. While you were talking, I was already looking, and yeah, when you think about squad improvements, I pick out games. I pick out how I feel in certain games, ones that we haven't won, and Tim's touched on those games, and I remember how I felt in those games. I remember what we couldn't do, and who didn't do, and what we need to add. And that's how you develop your squad. I call them milestone games in my own little world I live in. And they're the ones you learn from the most, and we have to fix that. But it's all good, right? It's all part of the evolution where we were. Honestly, and now to where we are. And we said it many times, not everyone can come all the way. Do you know what I mean? There's been a number of contracts have gone out. That tells you who's coming on the rest of this journey. And there are some that yet to be discussed, shall we say. This will all become clear in the next months.
Yep, I will grudgingly do the transfer content with you, Clive. And just as a final word, cannot thank you enough for coming along this season with us, for sharing some of it with us, whether it was in live events or whether it was through the podcasts, whether it's saw you at the ground or at other events, whether you're going to be in LA or Philly, or whether you're not able to be at the live events, and hopefully someday we can meet in person somewhere. Sharing this season with us made it, and I'll speak for myself here, made it a better season, a more important season. This community is now family to me. It is definitely a group of people that I feel so close to. And I look forward to going on another one of these journeys with you. I'm excited to spend the summer getting into all the silliness of every transfer rumor, the player we can't afford to miss, the one we're going to double swoop on, the one who's shocking, get set for a shocking exit. I'm excited to do all of it with you and keep going. But this is a beautiful, unfinished story, and I am excited for us to continue to write it together. Tim is on Twitter at Stillminator. Thank you, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Clive's on Twitter at ClivePFC. Thanks, Clive.
Just remember, my son, you never arrive. Thank you very much.
You never arrive. Thankfully, I arrived home and slept a lot last night. I needed to. We'll have a patron pod for you tomorrow and a lot more all week. I love you. We love you. Paul loves you as well, by the way. Everybody love everybody. We love you. And as I always say this time of year, we will talk to you after Arsenal 10 transfer window nil.